Okay, everybody, welcome back to Concordia University's Force Space. Thanks for joining us for the next part of today's event, which is Leadership in Environmental Digital Innovation for Sustainability's LEADS. This is the wrap-up event. And the next part is the growing place of AI in our world, environmental and ethical social considerations. Now, this is a panel conversation about the environmental, ethical, and societal implications of artificial intelligence and its growing influence on our society. Now, just to get things going, I'm just going to pass the microphone back to the program director for LEADS and professor in the Department of Geography, Planning, and Environment here at Concordia. Damon, back to you.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, well, welcome again, everybody. Welcome to our panelists who have just joined us. I'll introduce them all to you momentarily. So just to recap, so the LEADS program has been running for 6 years now. This is a graduate training program kind of sitting at the intersection of digital and AI tools and sustainability. And you know, I sort of alluded to this earlier, but you know, and also Genevieve in her talk also, you know, spoke of the, you know, massive developments and societal changes that have occurred over the time period that we've run the LEADS program. And I mean, I remember when Amy Luers, who was then the director of the Future Earth office here in Montreal, approached me and sort of pitched this idea. You know, my initial response was, okay, that sounds interesting, but I know nothing about AI. I'm a climate researcher. I run climate models, and so we wrote this proposal that, you know, attempted to kind of convey the imperative of kind of understanding the digital revolution and trying to orient that towards positive societal change around climate and other sustainability challenges. And so, you know, in the early years of this grant that somehow we got, the, you know, AI tools were these kind of mysterious but powerful things that could do lots of, you know, fantastic things if you know how to use them. But there was a very steep learning curve to actually learn how to kind of run an AI model and get it to do what you want. And so part of our early goal of the program was to, you know, give students a sense of how you might go about doing this. You know, 2 years into the program, generative AI, you know, exploded onto the scene, and you know, the you know, questions around the societal and ethical implications of AI were already there. I mean, people were concerned about this, but this kind of amplified all of those concerns as well. So again, it was, you know, no longer quite so, well, still mysterious, but much more accessible to everybody. And you know, and the concerns will still there about, you know, what information is this giving us? Is it reliable? Is it, you know, is it based on ethical principles or not? And then, you know, over time also then the environmental implications of AI use became, you know, very salient, and I think this is something that, you know, has really kind of come onto the scene in the last couple of years. I mean, again, it's something that's always been there, but the growth of data centers around the world have underscored the kind of material footprint of AI in a way that I think is really, you know, concerning to a lot of people. And then, you know, finally, as we're kind of coming to the end of the LEADS program, but you know, I think AI has also become a polarizing force in the world. You know, I think people have very strong opinions, you know, ranging from I will never do anything with AI because it's evil, to, you know, AI can do all these amazing things, and why would anyone not take advantage of that? I mean, it's certainly the case that AI is, you know, driving environmental damage and social inequality, you know, and kind of the power of AI to accelerate those things is also becoming apparent in different ways. Yet it does remain a powerful tool, and you know, if we fail to figure out how to orient these tools towards positive societal outcomes, you know, the opposite will occur by default. I mean, you know, it is interesting. I was at my son's college graduation on the weekend at the College of the Atlantic in Maine. And AI was, I think, mentioned by 3 different speakers as kind of one of the you know, forces in the world that's kind of eating away at the fabric of society, or at least, you know, it's kind of a looming threat in the world right now. And so I think you know, there is a growing, you know, fear and concern of AI tools as something that, you know, can be dangerous in addition to being, useful and positive. So I think as a LEADS program, we've kind of followed this trajectory of enthusiasm and wanting to kind of understand how these things work so we can use them for positive applications, to kind of more and more appreciating the drawbacks of doing so and the pitfalls. And so the point of today's panel is to try to kind of explore some of these questions. So I'll introduce the speakers. So Genevieve, who you've just heard from, maybe I'll quickly reintroduce in case there's new people in the audience, but is a freelance AI researcher, currently working with the Multimeter project, the University of New Hampshire, and has worked on various other projects, including a citizen science game with the Monterey Aquarium. François Burra, to my right, is a digital sustainable strategist and consultant with 15 years of experience. He runs Decarbonade, a digital sustainability studio to help organizations reduce their digital emissions. He also provides training in digital decarbonization and sustainable AI, with more than 1,000 people trained to date. Measures organizations' digital footprints, creates low carbon experiences. He also wrote a playbook called Sustainable by Design, a playbook for project managers, and co-founded the Responsible and Sustainable Digital Collective in Quebec. Tanja Tajmel, next to François, is the scientific director for EDI as part of Voltage, the Concordia University's research program funded by the Canadian First Excellence Research Fund. Her work and research focuses on equity, diversity, and inclusion in STEM, inclusive innovation and the social dimensions of science and technology. She has led numerous interdisciplinary initiatives in Canada and internationally, and has served as co-principal investigator of a different NSERC-CREATE program called SE4AI since 2021. That might be a more useful acronym. I don't know if I said that right. Finally, Vijay Kolinjivadi is an assistant professor in sustainable and equitable economies in the School of Community and Public Affairs, and is also cross-appointed in my own department, the Department of Geography, Planning and Environment here at Concordia. He's a team leader for the Earth negotiations building of the International Institute for Sustainable Development, IISD. Vijay is also co-author of the book, The Sustainability Class, which examines how a sustainability apartheid excludes certain places and people from those where investments in so-called green lifestyles and eco-modernist visions for the future are being made. So thank you all for joining us today. So we'll start with a few minutes of opening remarks from each of you, and then we'll do some questions. We'll take some questions from the audience and go from there. So maybe I'll start with you, François.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, those here and online. Thank you for the invitation. I guess we have 5 minutes each, or do we have less than that? Okay. I try to do less, but I'm not always concise. So sorry for the lengthy bio earlier. It felt like a bit too much. I was laughing when I was hearing it, but I provided the content, so I have to blame only myself. So in my day job for the last 5 years, I've been helping organizations to reduce their emission linked to their use of digital and most recently AI and Gen AI in particular. And throughout all my intervention and projects, there's perhaps two things that I wanted to maybe kick off the discussion with, and I'm sure there'll be plenty more discussion we could have all together. The first thing is we always talk about AI, and we know that AI is kind of a very broad term that we can compare to transportation, between a rocket that goes to the moon and back, a skateboard or a bike. We're not talking about the same transportation. And I think with all the hype with AI, we're confusing an AI that's been around for 40, 50 years, that have been proven in society to bring positive impact, whether it's for optimizing processes or research and so on and so forth, and is a proven climate solution, to stay within the context of the discussion today. And I think I arrived a bit late, but I think that's perhaps what you were presenting earlier. And Gen AI, which is very the brand new kids in the block, and which has no so far proven scalable, applicable, is not a solution for climate change. And yet, because we use this term AI as very broad, we are creating a hype about a tool that is actually not a climate solution, which makes me very uncomfortable. And based on the tremendous impact it has on the energy consumption, water consumption, and emitting emissions globally, but also because it's not contributing to bring positive social change. When we think about like the political, economical lens, environmental, obviously, like cognitive challenges that comes with the Gen AI technology, I think there's many aspects of this Gen AI technology that I'm a bit uncomfortable. So I think we need to be, like as a collective, a bit clearer on like the terms that we use when we are referring to one technology versus another, because the impact and how it's presented as a solution for the future, for me, is very different, whether we talk about machine learning or Gen AI. So that's the first point. And the second point, I would just wanted to highlight a myth that I see, like especially as we're in Quebec, you know, with plenty of renewable energy, like we are running on 97% on hydroelectricity, which is fantastic, and we can be very proud of it. And we have like tons of water, like 3% of the l'eau douce, like clean water, I guess, available in the world is located in Quebec, so we can also be very proud of that. However, and that attracts a lot of interest from mostly like US companies wanting to develop data centers in Quebec, but also the rest of Canada who finds a cheap way to be carbon neutral by moving their data centers in our beautiful province. However, we see that Hydro-Quebec is also communicating that we're going to be short on electricity within the next few years. There's different tension in the grid that are already flagged, and same for water resources. There is like a water reservoir that are connected to hydro plants that are running very, very low, like abnormally low, given the season of the year. And so this myth of like we have like abundant water, abundant energy, and like renewable energy that create this like very compelling narrative to build like tons of data centers in Quebec also makes me a bit uncomfortable, because I think it's far from the reality, and I think we should go back to thinking about the actual use of those data centers, how they're going to serve citizens and the planet, rather than just be part of a larger capitalist scheme of like just getting more growth for a very few amount of companies, mostly located in the Silicon Valley. And from a sovereignty standpoint as well, like I think there's a bigger discussion to have. So anyway, different topics, but I think it goes further than just the environment. And I hope I'm within the 5 minutes, so I'm going to leave my colleagues take the mic. Thank you.
Shall I go next? Yes, okay. Yeah.
Yes, sorry, please go ahead. I just wanted to have access to a mic to facilitate. So, Tanja, yes.
Yeah. So thanks for the invitation and for being on this panel. I have a feeling that there will be a lot of redundancies, and I can only echo what you already said. So when it comes to AI, I think it's interesting to which extent it is now everywhere, and how it is discussed, and how it is push towards being everywhere, on everyone's mind, in every context. And I don't think that we have seen that with any other technology so far, while being concentrated and controlled by, let's say, a handful of enterprises, which means it is inherently a kind of a political technology comparable to, I don't know, genetic technology or nuclear technology, but without any comparable regulations. So this is really something which is very new. And when thinking about AI, I mean, my background is science education, basically physics education, and I'm also very much interested in discourse analysis. So I'm looking at the discourse and what the discourse is making with us. And we are now basically convinced by the discourse that AI is something extremely powerful, extremely important, and we are also convinced that there is no way out. And the discourse, the overall discussion is making that we have the feeling, okay, this is a technological determinism, we have to follow that. And the question that we have here is not only AI agents or agentic AI, but also the human agency. So where do we see human agents in this process? When it comes to diversity, inclusion, and equality or equity, when we look at the, let's say, stakeholders or different groups that are involved in AI, then there are those we can say who own AI, then those who develop AI. This is a very interesting group, the programmers, the computer scientists, the software engineers, those who use AI, which are not necessarily those who develop, although those who develop AI are also using it, but those who use AI are not necessarily developing it, and those who are used by AI or are determined by AI because decisions are made about them without them really using AI. And when we think about inclusion and equity, we need to think about, along these lines, what kind of power relations are constructed, reconstructed, re-established, reinforced through AI. So far, we have not seen, and thanks for mentioning the difference between machine learning AI and generative AI, so far we have not seen that one of the biggest problems in society is huge inequalities in the labor market, huge inequalities with distribution of resources, inequalities along the line of different categories, be it gender, race, language, economic background, and so on, and intersecting categories. We have not seen that especially generative AI has improved any of these situations. In fact, last week there was a paper published, preprint on Archive, which investigated 4 million job applications to 100 employers in the US and 11 industrial sectors, and they found huge racial disparities because these employers are using hiring tools. 90% of US employers are now using AI hiring tools, and we can only imagine what a kind of amplification of intersectional discrimination happens when these tools are being deployed without specific regulations. So that is what I'm concerned with. I think we are coming maybe later to the question of education and higher education and science and what role it can play to science. Thanks for your great talk. Of course, there are also downsides when we talk about the right to science, the right to culture, but I won't take too much time now for the introduction, so thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Vijay, please.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me here. I just want to start. I'm going to just say I would be here all day, so 5 minutes is going to be very tight because I'd be here all day if I was going to describe the many reasons why AI is harmful for our society and for the future of our generations to come. So first of all, I just want to say I am not against, I am a professor at the School for Community and Public Affairs. I'm not against technology. Technological innovation is what makes us human. It generates our ability to relate, to create, meet our individual collective needs. What I am against is technological innovation that is embedded within a political economy of authoritarian techno-fascism. That is not technological innovation, in my opinion. The Silicon Valley mantra of, quote, move fast and break things, well, it's really about breaking things, actually. Under this current political and economic context that we live in, AI is being developed as a kind of planetary level weapon, used as a cudgel for elites to maintain their power while generating a speculative bubble that they can eventually cash out on. And by elites, I really literally do mean a handful of billionaires who control enormous amounts of economic and political power to propose their delusional visions of what human progress should look like. And as environmental justice researcher activist Rania Masri recently argued, AI is, quote, the ultimate harm. From nearly up to 2 billion liters of water used in some of the largest data centers to the amount of fossil fuels and even now nuclear energy use that AI data centers are incentivizing, transforming valuable land for food production, biodiverse habitats that sustain life support systems. I am a trained ecologist. I am a political ecologist. I study the contested understandings of nature and environmental relations within the political economy of value accumulation. And so I also look, as part of that, at the material and energy throughputs associated with economic activity. So from a sustainability lens, there's a couple points I want to raise. So first of all, I really recommend having a watch at Valerie Viach's recent documentary that just released called Ghost in the Machine. She talks about, and so in that film, it's one of the big parts of the documentary is going into understanding what general intelligence means. So this is the move towards artificial general intelligence. So this is kind of the idea that a lot of this is moving towards. General intelligence is rooted in eugenics. It's based on this idea that we can rank intelligences. So, you know, we can start back from Carl Peterson to the godfather of Silicon Valley, William Shockley. All of these people made these claims around ranking intelligences with the idea and the aim that if machines can produce intelligence that's greater than the standard, literally modern European, just as the modern European's intelligence is greater than that of others, then we can actually advance and progress as a society. So linguist Emily Bender writes that anytime someone is comparing their computer system to what people can do, they are presupposing a ranking of intelligence, not only of people, based on eugenics, but also of machines in the ranking alongside people. All of this is incredibly dehumanizing. AI data centers, as already been described, use large amounts of energy. They claim to be clean, low impact, energy efficient, but cloud computing is not light touch by any means. Stephen Gonzalez Monserrate from MIT explored the materiality of all of this. I mean, we need coaxial cables, fiber optic tubes, power distribution units, transformers, water pipes, all kinds of, this produces enormous amount of heat, noise, carcinogenic pollutants from nitrous oxides to formaldehydes. These are cited exactly as you mentioned, Tanja, in places where, that were already suffering from these consequences due to things like redlining. They pulled enormous amount of electricity from local grids. There is, of course, also the transparency and accountability of how decisions are made. We don't have regulation, exactly as you mentioned, and this is data centers, exactly, are being deliberately cited in specific places, often under NDAs, tax rebates, and behind-the-table sorts of deals, just as the XAI data center in Memphis was constructed. So then the jobs argument, we're really talking about the greater impact of a loss of 1 billion jobs in the next decade. So this would be, again, as Must recalls, the fastest theft of wealth from low and middle income communities to billionaires that we've seen in history. When a company lays off workers, they pocket 100% of the profits, 100%. There is nothing that they will lose, that they stand to lose from that. What does stand to be lost in that is the impacts on the economy from those people who are laid off. Then there's, just to end with the exhaustion effect. I mean, we are made to believe that AI will make the work that we do more efficient. But the history of technological improvement within this political economy is such that efficiency improvements always result in more work. Why is it that we are more exhausted all the time with these technological innovations? It's because we're made to continuously produce. So those innovations will, for the few who do have jobs, will just result in deeply overworked people. And we think that it's saving us time, but it's actually doing a lot of harm in that respect. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Vijay. Jen, I know you just spoke for an hour, but if you would like to offer a few thoughts at the beginning of the discussion.
And I can be brief, because I agree with all of my co-panelists are bringing up such excellent points, and I hope we get to dive into them. And my own personal perspective on this era of humanity that we're entering, made me want to teach at Leeds. It made me want to be a part of this program. It made me want to be part of the climate change AI community. And my message in the talk that I gave here, and what I hope that many of you will be able to take away with you, is there's so many terrifying and difficult problems involved with this technology that absolutely deserve attention. And in that way, I find it similar to problems of climate change, that it can be completely overwhelming because it's really millions and millions of individual problems. It's not a single problem that we just need to figure out how to do carbon capture, or we need to figure out how to make sure everyone's trained in AI. There's not one solution. It's a tremendous amount of problems, and the way to solve tremendous amounts of problems is for individual people to be able to address the individual problems that they see before them. I don't know that that this kind of coding agent is going to be able to solve a problem like, early childhood education. I don't think that that'll necessarily happen. And to Vijay's point, especially about overwork, because that is my own problem, is how using these coding agents creates so much more work for me in a different direction. But the takeaway that I'd like to say is I hope that all of you go home and try to use a coding agent to do something. Try to use it to make software that is useful to you in your personal life. If you see something that you would like to do, a website that you would like to see made, a piece of software that you have to pay for that you don't want to pay for, try it out to solve that problem for you. And if I have any core belief, it is that by using this tool that you will understand why all of the things that my co-panelists have talked about as problems, you will understand those problems better. That you will understand how to name the different parts of AI or the different parts of this problem better because you've used it, you have direct experience with it, that you will understand where regulation makes sense. There are so many places that coding agents have now been used and will only be used more and more. The very first thing that scares me the most is law enforcement and war. And so when you're, like, for example, I think the first project that I used a coding agent to make was a project timer. I don't know if any of you use the Pomodoro method. So I wanted to have a Pomodoro-style timer, but I didn't want to buy their app. So I asked the coding agent to make me the app so that I could have it on my machine. And the idea that that also picks bombing targets for the United States. There's no extra review. I mean, sure, there's generals who theoretically review these things, but I didn't review how it made my task timer. And it did so many things when it made my task timer. And it actually looked at lots of files on my machine. And then it was asking me about, do you want a timer to do your taxes? Do you want a timer for your time with your children? How did it know about that? Oh, because I let it look at those files on my machine. And so I think that in order to understand the problems that my co-panelists are talking about, to understand them more deeply, to understand what there is to be worried about, how you can be worried about that using the tools yourself is a way to interact more deeply and be a more responsible citizen. And for better or worse, however it will come out, I do think that in a short amount of time, almost all educated jobs will deeply involve these coding agents. So there you go. All righty, thank you so much.
All right, well, lots of things to talk about. Maybe I'll start like at the end. So both you, Genevieve, and Vijay alluded to this. Well, you called it the exhaustion effect. I mean, other people could call it the rebound effect or Jevons paradox. The idea that it's sort of on a societal level, as things become more efficient, people do them more, and so production increases because it's more efficient, and so that's often seen as a barrier to to AI tools having a positive environmental outcome, because it'll just lead to increased production and increased impacts associated with that, even if the actual production itself is more efficient. And then so you were both kind of talking about it, that same concept at a personal level. As we become more efficient in our workflows, we're able to accomplish more, and that can accomplish two things. One is you can maybe do more in less time. I mean, that's sort of what you were talking about, Genevieve. But the other is that expectations increase, and the whole world starts doing more, and therefore we kind of implode from overwork and burnout. And I think we've seen that with we talked about the early days of Leads and how Zoom meetings were this fantastic new technology, and we did a whole summer school on Zoom, and then we run hybrid events. But now, 6 years later, there's this ability and in fact expectation that we can go from back-to-back meetings with people around the world all day long, and so we have seen this with technologies that expectations increase and personal work demands increase, and leads to burnout and exhaustion. So okay, so maybe I'll put this to both of you. How do you navigate that? I mean, and how do we think about AI and the kind of the personal and societal implications of that particular process? There's one mic. You need to fight over it.
I mean, I think it's quite a simple response. I mean, the big thing that I would say is, what is the value added in what we are doing? So there's two questions. What is the value added in using these tools? And then secondly, what is the value added within the structures that we're operating in? So if you have to write an email faster, let's say, is that really worth, going down the Pandora's box for creating a potential environmental and social collapse and just a very dark future, if just for the simplicity? I mean, this is I know this is some of the work that you've been doing about making things, making work go a little bit quicker, but I think we have to be able to zoom out. Essentially what we're doing here, and this is something Kate Crawford writes about, is we are, billions of years worth of organic material it took billions of years for this organic material to form, since before the dinosaurs. And we are extracting it out for milliseconds of efficiency for our convenience. Let's think about that for a little bit. Let that sink in. It's just the temporal whiplash of the efficiency gains that we think we're making in our lives to send an email 5 minutes, or not even 5 minutes faster, whatever, a minute faster, so you can go on and do something else, which 99% of the time, let's be honest, what are we doing with our free time? We're scrolling, we're sucked into technologies that are stealing our attention and destroying our social fabrics. So my response to that question, what do we do about it? We do not, we ask what the added value is, and we don't play along. We don't play along. We continue to resist. We continue to maintain our humanity. We continue to do the things that make us alive people. And that is what we do.
Thanks.
It's okay to have a different answer.
I don't have a different answer. I don't know that my answer is right. My answer is right for me. And my answer is that I also try to look at my life and think, what do I think is valuable? What do I think is a valuable thing for me to be doing? This is a Mary Oliver quote that's on a lot of pillows on Airbnbs. What are you doing with your precious life? And that hasn't resulted in me having a career like Kate Crawford's. To make that comparison, I have worked at major research labs. I've worked at, universities where I was publishing at top-tier machine learning conferences and thinking about, did I want to spend my career making AI bigger and better? And I didn't make that choice, but I am benefiting from that choice to do things that I like. harvesting crabs because I would like to eat crab cakes in Seacoast, New England. And my friends who, want to be oyster harvesters and spend their day in the Great Bay of New Hampshire up to their elbows in bird poop. I want to be part of that world, and I have the skills that I have. So I thought, what can I do? How can I participate in this place that I want to live, that I want to be in? And that was the right choice for me. But it also means that I'm not participating in policy discussions anymore. At a different point in my career, I was, writing articles about how law enforcement should be held to a higher standard if they're going to be using face detection or other AI techniques. And that was something that I was really passionate about. But I didn't make the choice to continue playing on that field. And I don't, my own aesthetic taste is to be hyper-local, hyper-personal, and think about what is important to me. How can I make my precious life in the moment as valuable as possible? And I am using these tools now. I suppose the only other thing that and I don't know how to make this better, is to bring it back to politics and regulation and policy. And that I do think that by participating in the world that exists now, I'm able to see in a different way than my neighbors and friends how the AI industry breaks the law, like how that's fundamentally a part of the structure of it, that these companies spent, all the techniques that we're using, at a fundamental level, it's multiplication. Everything we're doing is the basic idea of multiplying things together, but multiplying so many things together that we can copy everything in the world. And that came from how many hundreds of thousands of PhDs and how much public funding, and that these AI companies themselves are reaping the benefits from a public resource, and they're doing it to the most effect by looking at places in the world where there aren't laws or regulations that cover what they're doing, and then they're using that to make money. So I'm going down a bit of a rabbit hole here, but for myself, I think about how can I make the best decision possible for the effect that I want to see in the world? How can I do that? That, of course, doesn't necessarily lead to the biggest change, but it makes me aware of how other people might be changing the world in a way that I don't agree with or I don't want to support.
Tanja, maybe I'll go to you. You said at some point in your opening remarks that generative AI has not improved sort of any metrics of inequality, and I think that's probably true for environmental damages as well. I think for the most part, AI technologies in the world are accelerating all the amplifying the things that we're trying to fix, right? So I don't know. I guess my question is okay, so it hasn't yet. Can it, or is it fundamentally unsuited to that task?
To which task?
The task of making the world a better place.
Making the world better.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think, thanks for what you said. It made me think a lot about that we are centering AI and technology now a lot, and maybe we could decenter it a little bit and center more human values, shared values, because we are not speaking in the same amount about, for example, human rights, then we are speaking about AI now. So I would say before you go home and try an AI agent, first watch the documentary that Vijay mentioned, then read the Declaration of the Human Rights, then read the Declaration on Indigenous Rights, and then try an AI agent. So maybe that would be something that is also decentering a little bit the technology and contextualizing the technology into what exactly is it what we want to do, which values we want to, let's say, to have, and around which values we want to build our society. And efficiency, I'm not sure, it's not in the human rights. You do not have the human rights only when you are efficient, or human rights are not bound to efficiency in any way. In fact, the right to science, for example, is a right which is discussed not sufficiently. It is a right which is interesting for us as researchers, as scientists, but also because the right to science is embedded in the cultural rights, which means science is seen as a part of a culture and a cultural practice. And the right to science also says that it must be independent from the market and from state influence. And I think this is something that we also need to discuss, and we need to see to which extent the AI boom is now also triggering funding, research funding, for example. Which kind of science will be supported and which kind of science will not be supported? Last Friday, Canada published the AI strategy, Canadian AI strategy, and it is very much about the economy. It is very little about human rights, basically not at all. It's not very much about inclusion, not very much about participation. Basically, AI is the solution to most. It promises that. But I think Laurie Anderson said that if you think the technology is solving your problems, you don't understand the technology and you don't understand your problems. So we really need to think about what problems do we have, what problems do we want to solve, what kind of shared intellectual capacity, cultural capacity do we have to solve these problems, and to which extent can technologies, be it AI or another AI, technology, be used to serve solving the problems. And of course, scientists are using AI to solve certain problems, but we should not think that this will solve all other problems. But this is now what is currently discussed. It is now somehow in the room that AI will solve all problems. It will not. And when I compare, for example, AI decision-making and the racial bias in hiring to other processes of hiring that we know in higher education, at university, for example, all of us, we are at committees, right? We are always committee members. We need to do an anti-bias training before we can review any applications from students or funding applications or whatever. So we have an EDI anti-bias training, which is absolutely not sufficient. Then we are working on a committee, hopefully a very diverse committee, because the more diverse, the better. And we are discussing, right? And then we are coming to a conclusion based on a discussion, based on really having new thoughts, being creative as humans, sharing this discussion, sharing this moment, discussing what could happen if we are not granting this application, and so on. If we substitute that with AI, I'm not sure if we can cover everything that we have in this moment and that we learned over the past years, how we could make university a better place, how we could make it more inclusive. I'm not sure if we deploy AI or employ AI as a hiring agent here at university to select students, what would that look like? And that is something that we as teachers, as professors at a higher institution, higher educational institution, need to be concerned about. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Well, I don't remember what my question was now, but it was very interesting what you said. So, so François, you've been very patient, thank you. I guess I have a two-pronged question for you. One relates to what you were talking about, this distinction between machine learning and generative AI, right? And I've heard this before, that they're kind of very different beasts on lots of different ways, but it's also the case that generative AI is now becoming kind of the interface by which we interact with like all sorts of digital technologies, including more traditional machine learning models. So I feel like that line is being blurred more and more recently, and I welcome your thoughts on that. The other question I have for you, and this is something I wonder myself, is yes, AI clearly has a large environmental footprint, right? And I think that's unambiguous. But agriculture also has a very large environmental footprint. Probably the single most damaging sector of the economy for the environment is agriculture. Just by virtue of deforestation, species loss, chemicals, eutrophication, all of the things that agriculture does bad to the environment that we live in. And yet, it's fundamental to our society. So I wonder if you can just kind of place the, AI and data centers and the environmental impact against some other kind of examples in human societies. Yeah.
Thank you for the question. And just before I answer, I just wanted to thanks and be grateful about all the very valuable and critical points you're raising, because that's the type of thing that we need to hear, and the discussion we should be having at here, but also at a larger scale at the province and federal level. And I wish the strategy that you mentioned that was released on Friday would incorporate some of those points, because it's clearly lacking the human aspect and the protecting citizen and the planet. So anyway, a big thank you for the points you're raising. In terms of industry, what is interesting to your question is that digital or internet or ICT as an industry is the only industry right now. So already, like, just as a fact, it's about twice in terms of like the amount of global of the greenhouse gases. It's already represent about 4% of all gases in the world, and greenhouse gases. So it's already twice the amount of the aviation industry. And so that was numbers from a study from 2025, but about from numbers in 2023. So already at that time, so 3 years ago, before the big boom of the Gen AI, was our industry, digital industry, was already about twice the amount of the aviation industry. So that's we're already a big part of the problem. But now when we compare it to other industries, we are the only industry that has no plan to decarbonize or to mitigate our impact. We are the only industry who are like accelerating and facing an exponential growth, largely due to the Gen AI phenomenon. And just as an example, between 2025 to 2035, so within 10 years, the energy consumption related to Gen AI would represent would consume 5 times more energy than the current electrical needs of Canada today. So we are already, as an industry, as digital industry, already a big part of the problem. And compared to the other industry, we disregard absolutely the direction of travel, and we are just accelerating without any consideration of the impacts. And we're obviously, like, my lens is more on the environmental impact, but as we discussed previously, there's many other impacts that we should be also looking at. So I think that's the first part of the first thing that I want to mention. But if we take a step back outside of the direct impact of digital technology, currently, like there's a big good question around what this technology is being used for. And we're talking about how we can contribute to science, how we can contribute to finding new medicines, or like helping on the health standpoint and education and climate change, which is great. But right now, 60% of the technological needs, for instance, of fossil fuel industry is delivered by Microsoft, for instance. So we see like those huge corporations leveraging all their brains and talents to accelerate the fossil fuel industry. And so when we're like looking at these big trends of AI would change the world, etc., in reality, what is happening is that it's being used to promote this vision of society that we never agreed to, and that is going against everything that we know. So I think it's in isolation, the impact of the digital industry, as I said, twice the amount of the aviation industry, and about the same as road freight, is almost immaterial. It's absolutely not true. It is material and very physical, but it's nothing when we look at the bigger picture around how technology is accelerating fossil fuel extraction. So I think that's for the second part of the question, and I forgot the first part, but I think it was a distinction between the two technology. But anyway, I think just to answer this question very quickly, I think we need, it just showcase the fact that there is a huge gap in terms of awareness around technology and how it's being used, how it's being presented, and the only thing that it highlights is the gap between those two, because it's it's a political agenda, as we discussed. There's billions and billions of dollars invested in this huge economical bubble, and this self-fulfilling prophecy needs to happen. So that's why a lot of money are being put behind it, and we're being, like, even at the level of the different governments or at the economical development organization, you cannot get funded if you don't have an AI component within your project. For me, like, when we come to looking at the needs that you were referring to, it's nonsensical. We should first understand the need before we can look at the problem. If we all have a have a tool in our hand, like, what is the saying, like, a marteau, I'm losing my English, sorry? Thank you. If we all have a hammer, all we see is like is nails. So right now it's kind of what's being presented at us, and I think it's already a very limiting belief, and push back, we should resist. And at the local level, at the political level, in a different way, and also in our personal use, like, you don't need to use Google search. You can move in 3 clicks, and you can stop sharing your information with them. There's a different research group in Quebec, specifically, that are looking at how to help organizations and citizens to move away from, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Meta, and so on and so forth. And I think we should really look at our personal use and corporate use, organizational use, to choose technology in a way that we promote the vision of society that we support. Right now, I have a bit discomfort. I use Claude. You were mentioning you use some of those technology. So I'm not judging, because I'm also part of the problem, and we're all facing this duality. But I think we should be very mindful of what we use, because we are encouraging the vision of society that they want to see happening. And I think we all have within our power to adapt and make changes in our behavior. So anyway, I moved very far away from your first question, but
no, that's fine.
Yeah, thank you.
There's lots of interesting questions here. I might open it to the audience for a couple of questions. I can keep speaking, but I imagine there's questions out there. So please, if anyone put out your hand, do wait for a microphone if you'd like to ask something, so that the folks on Zoom can hear you.
Yeah, so if anyone has a question, just raise your hand. And for people on the Zoom, you can raise your virtual hand, or you can put it in the chat and we'll put it out to you. We have one here.
Hi, everybody. I've sort of struggled with this whole debate. I consider myself an environmentalist, and I'm very concerned about the impact of AI, but at the same time, I've used AI in my research to basically free up a lot of time, like to do data processing, to do coding, and to do a bunch of things, and that time I've actually used to do activism. And even in my activism, I've been able to use AI to accelerate and make my activism more powerful. And so when we have these discussions of I guess, demonizing AI, I struggle in that I fear the people that matter, that want to see more good in the world, and environmentalists included, and like human rights, everything. I worry that if we demonize AI, that we will fall behind in a way. And then all the people who don't have those intentions, their work will be accelerated, they'll be able to do more, and they'll get ahead and take more power. So I wonder how any of you would address this conflict and gray area that goes on in my head.
Any takers?
I'm going to try to be short, because I'm sure there's plenty of nice stuff waiting for to be said. I think, for me, like, if you're leveraging technology to try to do good in the world, whether it's like climate change, health, and so on, like, I would definitely be okay with a reasonable use. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I do a lot of stuff I'm trying to create positive change. So not that I'm disregarding totally my ethics and when I use technology, but I'm saying, like, out of all the use, like when you think about like AI slop, creating cat videos, or like using it for like, sometimes evil uses, I'm like, maybe like if there's, a handful of persons, or like, use case that are worth, using this technology to its full extent, maybe it's in this case us, or this kind of form of activism. At the same time, I would challenge what you said in the sense that by using this technology, we're also giving them power. You know, you mentioned that like not using them will give them more power because they go faster than us and so on, but also using those tools is also like feeding, you know, their project, you know, and accelerating their growth. So I think it's a kind of both and situation, but it's not an easy question, and I think we should not try to be perfect. We should try to aim for, you know, a most reasonable use to try to do our job the best we can, given that we have an impact and what we're aiming for is good, like quote unquote. So I would not demonize it too much when it's used for a good intention and good purpose, which is more the exception than the norm. And nowadays, I would say about specifically Gen AI.
Yeah, so maybe just a few words about that. I mean, it's not about demonizing actually, I think this sounds like every critique about AI is demonizing AI, which it is not. We need to discuss that. It's with any other technology as well. If you demonize cars, then nobody who feels responsible would go with cars and only the others would go with cars. No, it's not the case. But we have regulations for cars and for highways and for everything. If we demonize any other technology, some would be in advantage, the others not. But it's not the case because we have regulations. The case with AI is we don't have regulations. We don't have a legislation in Canada so far. There is the European AI Act. There is Brazil has a regulation. South Korea has a regulation, and some states in the US have regulations regarding AI, but Canada does not. And I think that is something that really needs to be fixed. And everyone is saying that basically. We do not need to think about how we should or what exactly we should govern. We just need to translate it into regulations. And we need to clarify also accountability with regards to AI. So it's a technology like any other technology, very powerful, but it's a technology which is out there have not been vetted before. And that has not happened with genetic technology, that has not happened with other technologies. So if you use it in your lab, then it's a different thing, but you wouldn't say, okay, and now everyone can try formaldehyde at home in the kitchen. You are not doing that because you are trained how to use certain chemicals or certain technologies. And that is what has not happened with a certain purpose because, of course, there is a huge economic interest. A huge interest of power distribution with regards to AI. So it is beneficial that many people are using it and are encouraged to use it because then it becomes more and more unavoidable, and because only then the bubble will not will sustain. But I think that's what it is about. Absolutely not demonizing or not using it, but responsibly using it, and that requires also regulation.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that we talk about in the sustainability class, which really looks at the effects that individuals can make by, for example, improving their energy efficiency, you know, making their lives more ecologically conscious, reducing their footprint. The reality is, you know, before you've even woken up in the morning, Elon Musk would have, you know, wiped out your lifetime's worth of energy efficiency savings before he had his morning mimosa through his investments, just simply from the investments. And we're not even talking about Musk. We're talking about multimillionaires, much less, you know, much less wealthy than he. I think with the question you asked, I think we have to think also about the individualism. You know, just as you might find the use of AI useful for making the activism more efficient or the work that you're doing more efficient, somebody else, you know, a military strategist, you know, might see the use of precision technology to, you know, kill the target faster, you know, like the Where's Daddy and the lavender technologies that are used, because the developer at the end of the day wants the real estate, the waterfront property real estate faster. So that's you know, so everyone is looking for that better use of the technology for their aims. But then at the end of the day, we're talking about sheer and brute power. Who your benefits through the efficiency, you know, that you made to make your work better will be completely overpowered by the billionaire or the you know, the bigger interests that are doing exactly the same thing for their interests. So I think we have to step away a little bit from, oh, this technology helps me do my work a little bit better. Well, it helps everyone do their work better, including those interests that are extremely, you know, dark for society.
So to connect a little bit to like economic interests, and one thing that I don't know when this will happen, I frequently like to come back to regulation because I also think that this industry is only exists because people who began in software said, how do I operate in a space where there's no laws? Because if I don't have any laws, then that will be very profitable for me. Like if other industries are governed by laws and I don't have to be governed by laws, then I will make more money. And so I would additionally layer in this idea that it doesn't have to be as much of a drain on the environment. It doesn't have to be as computationally expensive. Why do we think that this is how it's going to be forever? It was recently invented, and because of the structure of chip makers and software companies, it is profitable to continue making it expensive, but there's no particular reason it has to be expensive. So how do you make it so that it takes less resources, it creates fewer emissions, it's less of a strain on communities that it's, you know, operating in, that it's less of a burden on all of us individually, like our idea of what we're taking from our environment. It could be so much more efficient, or so much less of a drain on planetary resources if we decided that this is what we were going to do, if there was regulations that said it had to be less. There's nothing, as far as like I see in the last couple of years, there's no objective function that's going to make these technologies iterate in the direction that we feel is socially responsible. So I don't know how that's going to change your idea in your day-to-day work, or like the burden that you're carrying in your day-to-day work. But I hope that as voters and citizens, we become alive to the idea that this is only expensive because we're allowing it to be expensive. We created this solution, whether it's a solution or not, debatable, but we created this with our imagination, and we can make it better with our imagination too. We just haven't tried. And another thing that I think of sometimes is that we've like already paid for it in a way, right? That a lot of these technologies exist because of massive public investment. So I paid for it, and I should get some benefit because I already I personally put in, you know, some decades of work in this field, so I should be able to use it. And I think about, Vijay, I loved your point about intelligence earlier. And this is relevant to this idea of like, should I feel guilty about interacting with it, or how I feel about interacting with AI research, with these particular AI tools, is that I finished my PhD 10 years ago, and which is a while now, but socially it feels recent. And even 10 years ago, I would still constantly in computer science face the question of, was my female brain really suited to this task? Because I'm a woman, was I really able to think about these questions of computer science the way that my male colleagues could? And that sounds insane to me, but I know that it continues to be a popular opinion in this field. It continues to be a popular opinion at these AI companies, and that the AI that we're using is only a mirror of the people who created. It's only a mirror of society. All the AIs that we're using is a historical mirror of the intelligence artifacts that have existed in digitizable formats. So everything that we're using, who are the opinions that it's spitting back out at us? And do I want to be a part of changing that opinion? And I don't quite know how to do that. I don't have any friendships with Elon Musk or Dario Amodei or any of them. But on a day-to-day basis, I think that I want to be part of AI, and I want to be part of crafting how this tool gets used in the world and where it gets used, because I want to push back on that cultural concept of intelligence, and I want it to reflect me and be who I am as well.
Maybe one more question.
Yeah, we had one.
Hello. Hey. Yeah. So just I thought of it actually when you brought up the point about agriculture and farming, because I think it sort of kind of runs parallel where it's the agriculture we practice in this day and age is an unsustainable way of monoculture, of pesticides, herbicides, huge machines that farmers can't afford, that is subsidized by the government, and it's essentially for profit. So is there some sort of future where these AI models could be used in a more smaller, sustainable way, like a hospital having a specific machine for its clientele database or whatever? Can it be used for public social good with lots of regulations owned by the public? We live in a capitalist state, but I mean, one of the largest computers in North America is used to run the distribution for Walmart. AI could help to put a planned economy in place. Like, is there some sort of future where public good and AI can coexist without too many side effects?
So, democratized, decentralized AI as a potential way forward.
So I'm just going to jump in really quick and I'll hand it off to you. And I just wanted to point out that I think that is, we are only limited by our own goal setting. And that I think that the reason that we have what we have is because it naturally emerged from the way that capitalism is set up. I'm not a political scholar, I'm not an economic scholar, so I will leave that general idea out there. But the reason that things are the way they are is because they happen to make money this way, and there's no other objective to push back on it. And that all the things that you talked about, to me, are like low-hanging fruit, definitely. Let's do all those things. And the only reason it's not happening is because, for one reason or another, we haven't restricted the people who are making these technologies to want to do that. So my broader question is, how do we make it profitable, or, I mean, I don't know how to make that happen. There's so many things that are just not related to profit, so you can't make them profitable. But how do we make it desirable? How do we make it something that we want people to do? Yeah, how do we set it up as a goal that people want to drive towards? Because I think that it could be, you know, almost instantly apply to all the questions that you ask. I think could happen right away.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think back to during my PhD, one of the things that was a seminal piece of work for me was Lewis Mumford's 1964 article on authoritarian versus democratic techniques, in which he distinguished between the danger of authoritarian techniques, which were top-down, centralized, controlled, versus exactly what you're describing, like community-oriented, community-controlled technology. That is, you know, technology is good. It's what helps us. It's always been a fundamental part of our human society from the beginning. So technologies, you know, we have to build technology that serves the interests, the goals, and needs of people. That's what it's for. So to respond, I mean, to think about that possibility, I would say, well, even before we could talk about community-controlled AI or data, you know, we have to go back to certain other forms of neglects. What about community-controlled housing, community-controlled food, community-controlled transport, community-controlled basic needs that have not yet been met before we go to the AI? I mean, the AI could be helpful for that, but in order for that to happen, we'd need a fundamental transformation of, again, our political economy. There is no, just as the reason why developers have no interest in promoting affordable housing or social housing or affordable food or sustainable food systems that are not monoculture and not, you know, corporate control, is because there's no profit in there. And that's precisely what we're seeing with AI, exactly what you mentioned. And so it does require a ground up movement. And again, this goes back to the point that I made earlier about the agency we all have to resist AI within the political economy that we are in. We do not have to use these tools in the current format that they exist. We do not have to. We can say no. And communities have been saying no. It's really inspiring to see how communities have stopped data centers in the United States. It's extremely inspiring. It's extremely inspiring to see how indigenous people and settlers are in fact forming allyships over basic things like water, when previously they had been at odds, over these issues around land. Now people are starting to see, hey, they're stealing your land just as they once stole ours. They're starting to see these connections, like in New Brunswick right now, where a hyperscaler data center is being developed in Lorneville, where there are 400-year-old cedar trees growing that were completely ignored in the environmental impact assessment. These things bring people together. And so when people come together, new alliances get to form, and new forms of resistance about the futures, the collective futures that we really want, can start to emerge.
Thank you, Vijay. Maybe we're coming up at time, so maybe we'll just transition directly to kind of closing remarks. And so, Tanja, why don't you go ahead and
Okay.
you can either addressing the question or just any last thoughts you want to offer the conversation.
Maybe coming back to higher education and to students and computer science and software engineering students, I think that this kind of downscaling idea is also important, that computer science students, who are the developers of tomorrow or already of today, should be familiar with and are familiar with. And that is what they are telling me. I developed a course, Social Aspects of AI, for the CREATE SE4AI program, which is a graduate program for software engineering computer science students, pan-Canadian program, and one of the first programs that had a social aspect course as mandatory course for the students. And they are very open to this idea, actually, and really thinking about, okay, how large does the system need to be in order to fulfill the task that we need for the hospital or for the university or for whatever. So I think that is something that is doable, but again, the political will needs to be there. I pass it over to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to piggyback on what Vijay said. There's a bunch of inspiring examples of organization, and some very large, that are just moving away from those big corporations that we don't necessarily agree with from their vision of the world. Like just recently, I'm going to share a quick example. Like the European Parliament fired Google to move to Quant, and that's not a small feat. There's the French government that decided to move away, to build their own video conference tool, to move away from Google Meet, Teams, and so on and so forth. There's another ministry in France who is building an open source mutualized suite of tools, like let's say that would perform what we do with Excel and spreadsheet and the Google Doc and so on and so forth. So there's a bunch of organizations that are leading this path to move away and don't grant more power to those organizations that are not necessarily driving us to the right direction. So what I'm trying to say is that there's hopes. There's hope from an organization standpoint, but also from a community standpoint and at the individual level. So there's many things we can do, but I think we should try to do them one by a step at a time. You don't climb a mountain by doing a giant leap. So let's just move away from one tool and then another, and then gather as a community to see how we can make better and more informed choices. And I will leave on just the resistance piece. Again, Vijay, sorry, I'm quoting you a lot today, but I'm part of a non-for-profit called the Sustainable and Responsible Digital Collective based in Quebec. And we are in the process to map all data centers in Quebec, and then perhaps in the next project in Canada, to organize local resistance regarding future project of data centers that would be in developing or that would want to be developed in Quebec, whether it's by Quebec company, by Canadian company, or from abroad. So I think those are opportunities for us to create knowledge that empowers us to take a collective action to resist. And so if you're interested by this type of project, please come see me after this panel. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for the audience. Let's have a hand of applause. So I think we'll close the panel discussion here. I don't think anyone's like leaving instantly, so please accost them further if you have other questions on anything. After you watch the documentary and read the book, if you still have time tomorrow morning to come to Genevieve's workshop on agentic AI workflows, there's still some space left in that. It's at 10 o'clock in the ER building. Speak to me or Odile if you want the details of that. And please stick around for the poster session, which is starting as soon as we get them set up, and we'll have some snacks and drinks in about half an hour or so. So thanks again for being here, and yeah, enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you, Damon. Thank you everyone for joining us here in the space. We're going to close up our Zoom and live stream now, but this conversation as well as Genevieve's talk earlier are both available on our YouTube channel, and you can revisit them there.